Hello everyone, thank you for joining the TeamsNation monthly meetup for December. This is going to be great meeting with some Christmas theme. Of course, it's just a week and some days ahead of us before we get to the holiday season. But before that, we have a splendid couple of sessions coming up and hopefully some great discussion as well. My name is Vesa Nopanen, and I represent one of the 4 people who are organizers of the TeamsNation. That's when PowerPoint started to work. So together with Chris Horde, Adam Deldinger, and Chris Webb, we are organizing TeamsNation monthly meetups, but also, of course, the TeamsNation, the community conference, which was previously known as the TeamsFest. And the idea here, it goes back over almost a couple of years now, was basically creating a network of Teams professionals. And you can be an end user or a pro dev and anything between. What combines us or connects us together here is the love for Teams and passion for Teams. And we want to create a better workplace and create a better kind of experience with that. So with this, we are providing everyone opportunities to present and share, because it's not always easy to get a seat in a big conference right away. So these kind of monthly meetups are an easy way to get started. And of course, we share the information. We are sharing the recordings on the YouTube channel, for example, so everybody can learn about Teams, and perhaps hopefully they will be one day speaking here in this meetup. And of course, if you want to speak, we have a kind of call for speakers going on. I will update the dates later. Okay, I've just hit the wrong key. The dates there, but if you want to come and join, want to speak with us, then in the event, then just contact any of us, and we can get you started. All backgrounds are welcome. And as I said, the basis goes to European Teams user group and the TeamsFest, and we have rebranded this as TeamsNation. So we are the same group, same thing, but there was some naming conflict, so we wanted to avoid any issues with that, and that's the primary reason why we changed the name. And of course, European Teams UG was very hard to pronounce, so TeamsNation is a lot easier, so we go with that. And it's a kind of perhaps combining these two kind of user group and the conference together better. So those are the reasons why we did this change. And get involved. We have a long list of something on social, so feel free to join us at Twitter and Meetup and check out what's happening with TeamsNation, or especially joining the monthly the Meetup group, because that's where you can get the information of what's coming up, and you get the kind of heads up about the upcoming speakers. And from the YouTube, you will find all our videos, and LinkedIn is there. And we have an Instagram as well, but it didn't fit in there. So you can look for TeamsNation there as well. So just share the word and share the love. So today we have 2 speakers, João from Portugal, who will be telling us about from zero to hero, basically about SharePoint and Teams integration parts. And after his part, Albert will be talking about staying compliant in Microsoft Teams, and that's a very, very good topic, or both of them are excellent topics, but that's a really great sessions. All right, I think that was one of my fastest kind of roll-ins to these events. I just did the Finnish version earlier, and that was already out in 4 minutes as well. So I guess, João, you are free to go. Take the stage.
All right, so let me share my screen. And let me know whenever you can see it.
I can see it.
All right, so thank you for joining today for hearing this session. Today I will be telling you how you can integrate Teams with SharePoint and SharePoint with Teams and what is common to both platforms. But before jumping into the topic, let me introduce myself. My name is João Ferreira. I'm from Portugal. I've been working in the Microsoft ecosystem for almost 9 years, and I've started as a SharePoint developer, mainly focused on SharePoint branding, and I embraced Teams and Teams development since day one, since Teams was first announced. And I did the shift from SharePoint to Teams, but being a SharePoint guy, I never actually left SharePoint. So in this session, I want to show you what is available for you to take advantage of SharePoint inside of Microsoft Teams. During this lockdown, I wrote a book about Microsoft Teams because, well, we all had a lot of time because we were just sitting at home. So I wrote a book called Hands on Microsoft Teams, and I'm also the owner of 2 blogs, Hands on SharePoint and Hands on Teams.net. And underneath here, it's my Twitter handler in case you want to get in touch with me after the session. All right, so for this is a slide that I always include in my presentations in case we have anyone in the session that is not yet familiar with Microsoft Teams. So Teams, the fastest growing business application ever, the central hub for Microsoft 365. And some say that it could be easily a lightweight operating system where most of the users don't need to live to do their daily tasks. So with this being said, let's see how Teams and SharePoint, how they work together and how you can leverage and take advantage of the tight integration between these 2 platforms. So before we jump into the demos, I want to talk about what the platforms have in common. If you don't know, Teams, part of Microsoft Teams sits on top of SharePoint. SharePoint is no longer just that ugly thing that no one knows how to use. It exists in the company, but no one cares about it. No, nowadays it's there. It's silent and it's almost even, but if you are using Teams, you are using SharePoint, even without knowing, and it's time for you to start taking advantage of the great potential that SharePoint has for you. So there are endless integrations that you can do with everything that comes out of the box in both platforms, files, news, rich landing pages. Now SharePoint lists or Microsoft lists, it's hard to say how to call it right now because Microsoft just created a new application to handle Microsoft SharePoint lists. That it's called SharePoint lists, but both allow you to bring information from lists, data that you have in lightweight databases and displayed inside of Microsoft Teams just with a few clicks. And soon to be released is the SharePoint Home site application that will look like this and will allow you to directly access to your SharePoint internet from the Microsoft Teams context. So more and more, the users will not have the need to go to the browser or to go to SharePoint because SharePoint in reality will be available for you to consume directly from Microsoft Teams. So out of the box integrations and how things look like. These 3 Russian dolls are my simplistic representation of how Microsoft Teams architecture looks like. We have Teams. Inside of Teams, we have channels. Inside of channels, we have tabs. So this is what a typical user on Microsoft Teams see, and this is how they see Microsoft Teams being represented with this hierarchy of Teams, channel, and tabs. However, underneath this architecture lies a SharePoint site or multiple SharePoint sites, depending on the type of channels that you created. And for each Microsoft team, I have here Team A and Team B, one with private channels and another one without private channels, and the correspondent representation in SharePoint. So for each theme that you create in Microsoft Teams, you will get a SharePoint site collection. And in this site collection, you will get a document library created by default. And for each new channel that you created, a new folder is created inside of that document library. So without even touching SharePoint, you are heavily using it because all your team files are being stored inside of SharePoint. Then we have the version with private channels. And with private channels, things become a bit different. Site collection for your main team, and then for each private channel, you will get a new site collection. And this site collection will have the name of the team concatenated with the name of the channel. So you will end up with multiple SharePoint sites, and the permissions will not be inherited from the parent site collection. So this is how things look like in terms of architecture and in terms of how you can get the SharePoint and Teams connected. So let's see how we can put things to work and how we can work with files we have shared inside of Teams. So let's jump into my tenant and hopefully it will work. I have it here ready for the demo. And the first thing that I want to show you is the Files tab. So Files, it's always here. You cannot remove it. It's always pointing to the right folder of your document library. But if you are a user of SharePoint for quite a long time and had files stored in other site collections, or if you are just storing files in other document libraries, you may want to bring those also in here. And Microsoft Teams offers you two different ways of doing that. So when you go to add a tab, if you look closely, you have three SharePoint applications listed here. You have a dedicated application for document library, another one for SharePoint pages, and now you have SharePoint application that gets all the features and functionalities from these two apps. But in case you have both, let me just show you how the document library works. So you are able to go to any site that you have access to and select a document library to bring it here. So if I select this site, Project X, and let me bring the document folder, the document library from the Project X file. All right, so this will create a new tab, and here you have your library from another site. In this case, this library, it belongs to another SharePoint team, which means that there's a few folders here that correspond to channels, but it doesn't need to be this way. One thing that you should take into consideration is that if you are getting information from another site collection into your Microsoft Teams, you must take in consideration that permissions might not be the same for all the users, and you may end up with users that will not see the content that you are adding in here because they simply don't have permissions to access to the sites where the document library is stored. So this is the old document library app for Teams, and as you can see, it has nothing to do with this one. So here we have a native Teams experience, much more integrated with the look and feel of Microsoft Teams, while in here we have a white background. Things look a bit different and the icons are different, but the functionality in reality will be pretty much the same. Still about files. Now, if we use the SharePoint app, instead, we have the same functionality. So we are able to go to this specific site of SharePoint that's based under the team, or we can go to any SharePoint site and bring the content from there. So if I get the document library, and I will just select this one that is here, or there's this one, this tab here that filters just the document libraries, you will see that things will look even different than the other apps. So The icons here at the top are different. This is inheriting the new lists and libraries layout, and it's a bit more integrated with Teams than the document library. But in reality, it's just two different ways of getting the same thing inside of Microsoft Teams. So with this first part covered, let's go back and open the presentation here. Rich landing pages and SharePoint pages. This is another thing that you can take advantage to bring information into the context of Teams. So again, back to the tenant, and let me tell you what do I mean by rich landing pages. When you add a new tab to your team, what typically happens is that you end up with a single area of information. If you add a PowerPoint, you will only see one PowerPoint. If you add a spreadsheet, you will only see the spreadsheet. But this has a lot of space, a lot of real estate for you to combine information. And SharePoint has and provides the flexibility for you to build pages with basically drag and drop and predefined web parts that allow you to set up and combine multiple things like this one that I have here. So this is a SharePoint page that in reality has several different web parts. It also has the same document web part pointing to the same exact place, but I have news, I have a to-do web part, I have quick links, whatever. The sky is the limit in here, and it's really simple for you to get this kind of things into SharePoint. So the only thing you have to do is to go to your SharePoint, and you just need then to go create a new page, select one of the existing templates are created from blank, hit create, and once it's created, you just need to grab the URL and get back to Microsoft Teams, and from here we will find two apps again. And in here, I will not open the SharePoint pages. I will just use the SharePoint because this is pretty much the same thing. And from here, you will be able to get any existing page that exists in this site collection, and that will behave as the landing page or the page for the content that you want to display. So let me add this one. I have no idea what I have inside of this playlist, but apparently it was modified. Well, actually, I've selected a list instead of a page. But yeah, in reality, what you are able to achieve here is, let me select here the pages and let me select news, is the possibility to bring more information from things that exist in SharePoint out of the box, like news. News is a great functionality that Microsoft brought to SharePoint. It works pretty well, and with news or news links, you can easily reach a lot of users in your organization, and you can have them displayed inside of SharePoint with the use of SharePoint pages. One downside of having SharePoint pages displayed inside of Microsoft Teams, and this is a personal opinion. As I said, I come from a SharePoint branding background, so I like to see things to match. What happens here is that if I change my settings and if I apply a dark theme, the SharePoint page will not adjust to the side to the theme of Microsoft Teams. Obviously, you can build custom code on SharePoint and change the DOM and change the CSS, but Microsoft does not recommend that, and it's a lot of work that I don't see the worth of having it, because sooner or later Microsoft changes something and it will end up broken or in a wrong state again, and you will end up with white background or black background on the default theme. All right, so back here to the presentation. Next topic is the lists. Lists are lightweight databases. They exist since forever on SharePoint. Microsoft just gave them a new life with Microsoft Lists and all the new features that were brought to the platform, and with row formatting, view formatting, header and footer customizations. Lists are really the thing that is evolving the most now on SharePoint, and that also can be used on top of your Microsoft Teams to display information. So again, super easy to use. This SharePoint app has all your lists here. You just need to select them from here. These are the lists, obviously, that exist in here in the site collection, but you can go a step further and bring them from another site. And again, be aware of the permissions, because if they reside in a different site, you may not have access to them in here. And if you know how to format lists, and unfortunately I don't have time to explain you how to modify the customizations, and this one obviously is not working quite well with this theme. You can use whatever customization inside of Microsoft Teams, and it works like a custom app, but built with data and a JSON that you've imported to the list itself. And here, because Microsoft released Microsoft Lists, if we go to Lists, the same thing will happen. So the Lists app will allow you to get the same lists into the Teams context. You can create a new one. You can bring another existing list from the site. The same car fleet is available here, and you will see that there's no difference other than the name. I have apparently 6 tabs with the same list in this team, but you can easily bring your information here, and you can take advantage of everything like views, filters, and all of that. So if I want to select the year of the car, I can select it here. All of this in the context of Teams. So the information, it's living, and it's stored in SharePoint. The user doesn't need to know that it's in SharePoint, but you as a team owner or a team administrator can easily implement this best practices of having information stored in the same Microsoft ecosystem, other than storing this in a Google spreadsheet or whatever, just because the user is more familiar using that. And then you have your data spread across multiple different platforms and companies, and eventually you will end up having problems with GDPR compliance and data being left over in the wild. So this is a great way for you to unify and to bring your information, your data, into the place where your users are working. So SharePoint, it's there. Take advantage of it, and make sure that you teach your users how to take advantage of this. All right, so this is everything that is available for you to use out of the box. You get this when you first get Teams, so it's just a matter of taking advantage and a matter of using the SharePoint apps. Now, how to extend Microsoft Teams, and here it's where things start to get a bit more interesting. So you can extend Teams with apps, and you can build personal apps and Teams apps with App Studio or SharePoint framework if you are a developer, and all of that will run beautifully inside of Microsoft Teams. So let's see 2 different examples of how you can bring a personal app with SharePoint pages inside of Microsoft Teams. And then let's see another example of a SharePoint web part working natively inside of Microsoft Teams, reacting and behaving according to the Microsoft Teams environment variables. All right, so if I open here the App Studio, and I will not go through all the steps because that will take me the whole time of the session. I will go straight here to the thing that I want to show you in this app. In the App Studio, you can create your own app. You have to define the short name, the full name, the images, all of that stuff. It's not complicated. The form, it's quite well explained. You just have to fill it and then move forward. If you want to get a personal app, even for your personal use or to distribute it to all your users, there are a few things that you have to take into consideration if you want to distribute them for your users and if the app will rely on SharePoint pages. Here I have a SharePoint with a happy smile and the SharePoint with a sad smile. And this page by default will not open if I go straight to the app when I first open Microsoft Teams. Now I open the file, so it will probably open. But if I go here to, let me just check. Yeah, it opens. But because the user, it's already authenticated and opened the SharePoint page in the context of Teams, which triggers the authentication. If that doesn't happen, and if the user opens Microsoft Teams, and if you have a personal app pinned as the first app, that it's the first thing that the user clicks when enters the Microsoft Teams, the user will end up with a blank page. And that is because naturally you pasted the direct link to the page as a tab inside of Microsoft Teams, as I have here. So content URL, and in SharePoint, blah, 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 .aspx, SPX, this is the URL for my page. This is what I want to display to the user. All good. Paste it here, paste it the website URL, all good. This will sooner or later end up with a blank page, and you will end up with your users complaining about the app not working. The right way of making this work is to route the SharePoint page to the Teams logon ASPX that exists in all tenants. So this takes care of the user authentication from Teams into SharePoint silently. You don't have to do anything about it. It's built in. SharePoint framework is using it. So you can also take advantage of that inside of Teams. I have actually an article that I will show you in a minute that explains all of this, but this then have a query string here with a destination parameter that points you then to the right page. Then in the website URL, that it's the page that opens when the user clicks in the icon to open in the browser, you can easily paste the URL to the SharePoint page, but this is not enough for you to get the page and the app to work. You have to then go to the domains and permissions, and you have to define all, not all of this, but these ones here, the wildcards. You have to define them in the list of valid domains for your app to do the authentication. This will generate a warning, but if you are building a personal app for you or for your teams, and if you know what you are doing, you can ignore it because wildcards are not allowed if you want them to submit this to the store. And here you have to define this ID, that it's the ID of the single sign-on resource that will perform the authentication. So all this I have explained in here, in this article that I have available in my blog. So the logon page, the valid domains, and the resource. The only thing you have to do is go through this, and this way your page will open 100% of the time. So no white pages and the using getting to a place where he will not be able to see it because he's not yet authenticated. If you don't follow this, and if the page opens, that is simply because you were already authenticated on SharePoint. And to be authenticated on SharePoint from the Teams context, all you have to do is open one of these SharePoint tabs with the SharePoint app, or click in the Files tab. This will trigger the authentication on SharePoint, and from this point on, you will be able to access to all SharePoint pages even without using the Teams logon. So, all right, how are we in terms of time? So it's still time to display and show you a more complex thing. And let me look here for this snake. So this is a game that I also wrote this year during the pandemic. Why not playing Snake on Teams if everyone is doing get-togethers and company activities on Microsoft Teams? Why not having also a game to play here? So this was built exclusively on top of SharePoint framework. The Snake game and the logic itself, I got it from a tutorial online, and then I converted it into a SharePoint web part, and I've connected it to a SharePoint list. So there's a leaderboard here. You can play with your peers, and the number of plays that you can get per day, it's also defined in here. So this is again a SharePoint app, but built exclusively on SharePoint. And because of that, I'm able to take advantage of the SharePoint properties of the web part, even inside of the Microsoft Teams context. So as an admin, I can say that my users can play just one game per day, or 2 or 3, or if I leave it empty, they can play how many games they want to. So this is one of the possible ways of integrating stuff. And obviously, this was built using SharePoint framework. SharePoint framework is no longer just exclusive to SharePoint. It's taking place to be the preferred development method across all the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. And SharePoint framework is aware of the context of where the app is running. This also runs on top of inside of SharePoint, but if I change this now to dark, my app here, and let me just refresh it, is aware of the team that it's applied to SharePoint, to Teams, and it transforms the layout to be exactly the same layout that exists in Teams. So everything looks perfectly integrated, and still it's running on SharePoint. The leaderboard, it's running on SharePoint. It's hidden on SharePoint. It's not the most safe thing. Advanced users with right permissions can easily cheat on this and find the hidden list. But well, the idea was to build a fun thing, and SharePoint gave me all the tools to bring the game into life inside of Microsoft Teams. If you want to use it, it's available in my blog and on teams.net, and I have also the source code available on GitHub, so feel free to grab it. So I think we are hitting the 25-minute limit, and I want to give you time for questions. I just want to leave you with this list of top 10 reasons why SharePoint framework in Teams rocks, in case you want to take advantage of SharePoint development to build apps for Teams. And I'm not saying that this is better than native development for Microsoft Teams. I'm just putting it here for you to know the advantages. And number one, no need for you to host a website work page. SharePoint will take care of that for you. The code that you use in SharePoint can be reused in Teams. Single sign-on is built in, and you will end up with free CDN So the app will be super fast inside of your Microsoft Teams. So the list goes up to number 10 that I want to highlight. And this is no longer just the SharePoint communities, SharePoint and Microsoft Teams communities, because both communities are one community. And if you have any question, or if you have any doubt, or if you don't know how to get started, just go to the PNP repositories or go to the PNP community. Find the community members, ask things to them on Twitter or on LinkedIn or wherever, or in this meetups, and I'm sure someone will help you and will help you to get started with the SharePoint development for Microsoft Teams. So hope this was not too fast. Typically, I do this session in 1 hour, but I wanted to condense it to make it feasible to this meetup. I just want to leave you my contacts before we go through to the questions. And if you have any questions, just feel free to shut them out, and I will be answer them.
Thank you, João. That was a great presentation, and I would add kind of point 11 is that you most likely have more SharePoint developers than full kind of Azure Teams developers available. That's also
right.
one of the key things, but that's the kind of great thing about Teams, that you can use different methods, and that's just great. There's a question from Edward. Would this be similar to the issue addressing accessing images in a SharePoint Online from Power BI? Would I need to send the URL via authentication redirect, going to the issue where you had to tap with supposedly a non-working authentication part to SharePoint?
Yeah. It's the same thing. So Microsoft has these pages. There are even pages in SharePoint that do all this routing and the authentication for you automatically. Typically, they are kind of even. Since I wrote this blog article and I did a video explaining how to use it, I think Microsoft also already updated the documentation. I spent multiple days fighting against this until I was able to find all this information in the manifest that was generated by a SharePoint framework web part. But yeah, this unfortunately is how things work. Things are never straightforward. When you think that you are getting there, there's always something that you need to take into consideration that it's not handled by Microsoft. But yeah, the routing between both applications needs to be taken into consideration. The good thing is that Microsoft done it already, has done it already for you. You just need to point into the right direction.
Yeah, I guess there's also the old joke about if something doesn't work there, well, it's SharePoint. It's kind of a thing. You can never expect like how it will behave, because there are some interesting things you just have to know. It has gone a lot better since the 2007 or 2010 version, that they're really quirky to learn. Okay, are there any other questions? Or you can.
I don't think there are any questions in the somewhere. So thank you, and yeah, it was a great session.
Thank you all.
Indeed.
All right.
Albert, are you ready?
Ready?
Oh yeah, I'm ready.
Excellent. You can take over the sharing and start your session.
Okay, well, great session. Thank you for that, and thanks everyone for being here this evening or afternoon. In my case, my name is Albert Hoitingh. My session will be on some parts of Teams compliance. Just a little introduction. I'm a solutions architect for Microsoft 365. I've been working with Teams ever since it was created or came out. I'm not a Microsoft Teams MVP. I'm an MVP on enterprise mobility, which means I'm very, very interested in anything to do with cybersecurity, governance, compliance, and you name it. So that's why my session is going to be on compliance with Teams. It's well, perhaps you're not aware of this, but it's a subject which does have a lot of sub-components. So I just figured I'll take a couple of those questions after this session, then yeah, you're welcome to contact me on Twitter or LinkedIn or Gmail or whatever, no problem. But I did have, because of the time restrictions, I did have to make some concessions. So I'm going to talk about retaining and holding your data. So where does Teams store that conversation, that chat message, the files, and how can we access that because of, for example, e-discovery regulations. And I also want to talk about information and communications protection. So what's built into the platform so that you can comply, for example, with a regulation on Chinese walls, for example, which are information barriers in Teams. I'll also be handling, at least on a short bit of time on auditing within Microsoft 365. But these are the most important subjects for this evening or this afternoon. One note before I start, I will show you some demos of the functionality as well. Please note that, this is Microsoft, so we will have licensing aspects. Most of the things I will be showing you are either, of course, E3 functionality like the e-discovery or the basic e-discovery and things like retention policies. The information barrier part of things and the DLP, data loss prevention, are, and like I said, information barriers are some form of E5 functionality. So please take that into account. Okay. Information retention and e-discovery. This might be a very interesting subject if you have compliancy issues regarding storage of information, getting to specific conversations, storing those conversations for longer time periods of time because of government regulations, for example. And to get the complete picture, we really have to know the architecture of Teams. And in the session before this one, we already had an architectural overview. I've got one too, so let's see how that looks. I got mine from Microsoft. I also created my own, but and I think this one's even better, to be very honest. And this really shows you the components of Teams. It was already mentioned in the session before this one that Teams really depends on things like SharePoint for document storage, for example. Private channels have their own SharePoint site collection. The normal site collection is where your general your general channel is stored, for example. And we also have OneDrive for Business if we start using one-to-one chat, for example, or one-to-many chat functionality. In that case, the document which you are sharing is, for example, stored in OneDrive and is sent using, the document isn't sent, but a invitation to the document is sent, a sharing, if you will. Other storage for Teams is either in Exchange, and that's where you'll find your conversations, for example, and also, which is coming in, it's here already, the storage of your recordings, for example. Those are now stored in Stream, but and you can use a PowerShell commandlet right now to move them to SharePoint Online or OneDrive for Business, which really makes sense if you want to use things like retention policies based on your recordings, to have them protected, for example, with information protection. It really does make sense to have those recordings there as well. So those will move to SharePoint and OneDrive as well. At the right-hand side of this picture, you'll see that, and I'll go into a little more depth in a couple of minutes, the conversations which are part of your Teams channels, for example, those are stored in separate folders in your Exchange mailbox. Those are called either Teams chat or substrate holds. And I'll get back to that in a couple of minutes. Okay, so if you want to retain your information, let's say you've got a regulation which states that any information part of a specific project or process or function you have within your organization needs to be at least retained like 5 years after it was last modified. For Teams, that's kind of complex because Teams has files, it's got documents, it has chats, it has conversations, it even has private channels right now. So if you really want to have a comprehensive policy for really complying with that regulation, you'll need to look at your SharePoint location because that's where your documents are stored, and you'll have to look at your Teams channels and your Teams chats. I'll show you how you can create such a policy in a couple of minutes. It's not that difficult, but you really need to have that look and feel. If you only want to store save the documents for a specific number of days or weeks or a specific period, then only a policy for SharePoint is sufficient. If you really want to have your chats saved, then that's possible as well. But to be complete, you really need to have those in the same policy. That's policy-based retention. Policy-based retention is not the same as the labels, which you might know of. That's the label-based retention. Labels are possible, of course, within the documents in Teams, but this is a policy-based retention. So the policy is in effect, and the users won't notice anything basically. So that's a very cool thing. If you really want to look at the information without any of these policies, that's possible. You can do a content search. You can create e-discovery cases, and then you can really look at that information where it's stored, and perhaps find some information you need to because of, for example, GDPR. I'll go into that in a bit more detail. Do note that there is going to be a difference between the e-discovery based on emails, for example, within Exchange, and your conversations. So take that in mind, and I'll get back to that in a couple of minutes. Okay. First of all, conversations, because I really think you need to know on architectural level where are those stored. So first of all, conversations are stored in a Cosmos DB and in Azure, but for a quick retrieval, they are stored in memory. So that's why you can swap within conversations. They're always stored, but they are written to the Cosmos DB. So that's the primary location. But in order to get them via e-discovery, for example, you won't be going to the Cosmos DB, you will be going to Exchange Online. Because Exchange Online, or a specific version of Exchange on premises in a hybrid environment, will use a concept called a substrate. And a substrate is basically, let's call it a copy of the chat, for example, between Albert and Peter over here, is stored in the mailbox of either the user or the group, which is part of the for example, the team. So it's stored there, and when it's stored, then you can access it using e-discovery, for example. Media and other items, well, those aren't part of that substrate. So those are stored in the CDN, Content Delivery Network, for Teams. So those aren't part of the solution. And still, there's some parts of the conversation which aren't stored. For example, reactions, audio messages, private channels. I think they're working on it right now, but I don't think it's there yet. And also code snippets. And code snippets might sound weird. You see over here, I've got a little chat over here. I've got some quotations. I've got some links. And I even have some code in here, a code snippet. And I'll just show you, I think in a minute or so, that code snippet won't be part of the substrate and won't be displayed. So if you have some people who know this, then they might circumvent some restrictions or compliance you have. Okay, anyway, for those of you who really want to go into the deep end, you can get to those substrates. They're into hidden folders in Outlook, in Exchange, of course. And the first one is called a team chat. So you'll find that one under the conversation history folder. It's a hidden folder, and if you enable a retention period, then it will be moved to another hidden folder called a substrate hold, which basically means that if you don't have a retention policy configured, then the retention for exchange will, or no, sorry, I misspoke. There's no retention. It's going to be saved forever until the mailbox, the team, or the user will be deleted. Then the substrate is removed. If you have a compliance retention policy, then those conversations and chats are moved to that substrate hold folder, and then the retention policy kicks in. A couple of minutes ago, I told you to remember Exchange and Teams. If you have Exchange retention policies, those will not cover the Teams conversations. So you do have that specific Teams policy. You need that to really save those conversations. If you don't have a retention policy in place, then the user, if that's allowed, can still delete chats, delete messages, etc. And if you don't want to do that, then you need a retention policy. Like I said, if you really want to go into the deep end, well, you can. There's an MFC mapy.exe on GitHub, and that's I think the only way to really get to that hidden folder structure. So look it up. It's great to see it in action, basically. Any message or conversation is stored in Exchange as a message. So it's an MSG file. It's sort of like an email file, and you can really get to that. So there it is. Okay, the other one, what we probably want to look at is document storage. Well, that's been covered in the session before me, of course. We've got channels. Channels are represented by folders in the document library. Separate SharePoint site collections are created for different private channels. I already said if you're going to use document exchange within a chat, then it's being stored in the OneDrive of the user, and a document is shared and not sent to the other user. And those are stored in the Microsoft Teams chat files folder in OneDrive. There are other locations. There's some which might be part of your compliance solution, but you'll probably need something like Microsoft Cloud App Security for that. For example, if you use Google or Dropbox. I really don't recommend using those within Teams, but that's a personal opinion. If you really want to look at to get to the private channels, well, there's a very easy PowerShell commandlet to really get all your private teams, basically, and your site collections based on that. And if you really look closely enough, you'll see that those private channels are basically the site collections name, and then the private channel name, and then you have your location as well. Okay, I think it's going to be time to really show you something as well. Just before I do, this is the the e-discovery content search part. Here you see again the same message I have in Teams, which pops up over here. And here's what I already mentioned. The bit of code, it just disappears. It isn't stored in the substrate, which is kind of funny. Okay, ending this part of the session, there's going to be something called advanced e-discovery, which is really cool because that really goes into the documents which are being shared. So not just the messages, but also the documents being shared. And then those are going to be part of your e-discovery case as well. Okay, show you how that works from a demo perspective. Let me just pop up my site over here. Okay, first of all, if I go to retention, for example, over here I've got my information governance part for Microsoft 365. If I create a new retention policy, yeah, of course, my session has expired. Makes sense. Let me just create a new policy. And over here I can, state what kind of information, or, well, no, that's not cool. Should this information be kept? I won't be going into any more details on this. If you want to know more details, please contact me, because there are some differences, for example, when it was created or when it was last modified, etc. But let's just keep it at this: 7 years last created. And now I can select my locations. And this is where the fun part of Teams comes in, because like you see over here, I can choose all kinds of locations, emails, documents, anything within groups, even Skype. But if I go, for example, to Teams, you'll notice, plop, all the other options are grayed out. So that's unfortunate. You probably would like to just select a team. That's not possible right now. I can have Teams channels and Teams chats within the same policy. But if I want to include the documents themselves as well, then I really need to have 2 policies, which are probably can have the same kind of the same name, but I do have to have 2 policies. Those are for the documents, and these are for the Teams conversations and chats. So I'll leave it at that for this one. I'll just show you from the eDiscovery perspective. Over here, I already opened this one just to be on time, basically. If you go to eDiscovery, in my next demo, I'll show you something as regarding information protection. So here are some credit card numbers. And in my query for eDiscovery, the only thing I need to do basically is to have some keywords or some other things I really want to search for. The message kind is IM, because it's a chat or a conversation within Teams. And my locations, if I go to locations, those are over here. I have one team I selected, which is a demo team. I'll just show you that in a couple of minutes. These are all the things to do with messages, including instant messages. So this is the one I need. Those 2 I don't need, because I don't want to go into documents and I don't want to go to public folders right now. So this is the one I need for this query. And like you see over here, I have some results. I'll just open this one as well. Again, credit card numbers. Here's the information you might like. What you'll see is this is the substrate. So it's my user, this one, who really started a conversation in this team. And that's the one I got here. So this is eDiscovery for Teams, and it's very easy going. If you're familiar with eDiscovery, you know that you can export this information as well. You can have statistics, etc., etc. So that, in a nutshell, in my case, I have only one location, but already 23 occurrences of this credit card conversation. Okay, let's get back to the presentation. Where is my? Here we go. Okay. Yeah, information and communication protection. That's the second part of this session. If we really want to look at what's happening within Teams, we also might want what's happening within conversations. Is there any information in there which shouldn't be there, either because there's an external party present within the team, which doesn't need access to the information we're sharing right now. So we have several options to really prevent this. One of them is data loss prevention. If some of you might know the data loss prevention within Microsoft 365, which works for SharePoint and Exchange Online, for example. If you try to share something which is blocked, then in SharePoint it will be blocked, or the message won't be sent if you're using Exchange, for example. Or you can have things like messages or warnings presented. You can have even alerts sent to compliance officers, for example. And the same goes for Teams. So the same interface, and I'll show you in a sec how that works and how that looks like. Of course, we can use classification labels right now. I won't be going into that in this session, but do note that if you have a classification label, the sensitivity labels, they now allow you to really control the privacy setting of a team, the external sharing setting of a team. For example, are guest users allowed? how does the team react when a non-managed device is accessing the team? Is that allowed? And what really is, I think it's now a week old. You can really have the external sharing options as well. So from SharePoint, the sharing options for documents will be handled using a sensitivity. So that's really cool stuff. And of course, we have information barriers. Information barriers I'll show you in after I've shown you the data loss prevention. So let me just show you that one first. Let me go back to my little demo. Over here, I have a Teams environment. Well, that's not a very big surprise, I guess. But you see, I've already played with some information. It's the same information you see here. So let me just see if I can just copy paste it in a new conversation over here. This is a team which has a guest. And I have a rule which basically states that information cannot be shared with external parties, and there it goes, because it has been blocked. This is basically from an end user's perspective. I get a message, I can have a URL behind that. What can I do? The external party just sees this message was blocked and no other information is given. This is, like you see over here, it's really fast. It uses the search and the DOP engine of Microsoft 365 to really enforce this policy. So as you see over here, message was blocked nearly straight away. Just to show you how we can configure such a rule, I've got some already. I'll just start from scratch for this demo, and I'll just create a policy. Okay. When creating a data loss prevention policy, you can have multiple options. You can have a standard template or just create one from scratch. So let's say I'll just, for the sake of time, I'll just say go for the US Health Insurance Act, HIPAA. So the system will start looking for this kind of information. Okay, I'm cool. I'm cool with that. I'll just get a tool behind this because I think I already have one like this. My mouse is, and now you see all the locations which I can apply, and those are a lot, and they really are being extended as we speak. For now, I just want to have Teams and Teams chat and messages. That's the one I want. So okay, now I'll just customize the rules just to give you an example of what the options are. Here I see, well, content matching HIPAA. And if I go and edit that one, then I'll have the options to really say, okay, what kind of sensitive information is required for this DOP rule to kick in, which is these ones, also this one. So the system will look at this information and this information. And then if it's shared outside of my organization, yes, that's the one I want, then I can apply an action. And that is, for example, restrict my access. Block everyone. I'm just gung-ho for this, just block any access to the information. And if I save this rule, it's going to take some time to get active, and when it's active, then you'll see the same DOP functionality being displayed as I showed you just a minute ago. So that, in a nutshell, is the DOP within Teams. Very easy to configure, a lot more difficult to really think about what kind of rules we need within the organization. While I'm demoing it, I'll just skip ahead to another demo, information barriers. Information barriers is a concept where you have different segments within your organization which aren't allowed to really share information. It might be that you have an internal audit department and some other department which really cannot communicate, well, at least communicate electronically together or with each other, which is kind of hard with Teams, where we have conversations, we can have documents, we can have one-to-one chat. So let's just look at how this works. For example, I have 3 colleagues. One is Connie, then I have Peter, and then I have a guy called Control, all based on a on a movie, but that's not that's not really relevant right now. So let's see if let me just I'll just add Connie Sachs, Peter and Control are both part of a different department. Connie and myself are part of a different department, so we are two segments where there's an information barrier. So let's start typing hi there. Let's see what happens. Well, as you might have noticed, I am only left with Connie right now. And that's the information barrier working. The information barrier detects that I'm trying to share information with people I'm not allowed to, so it really blocks that communication right away. Let me just try it another way around. Let me just contact Peter directly. No, that's not possible anymore. The administrator has disabled my chat. So this is very, very powerful functionality. It's, well, like I said, it's called an information barrier. It also works with Microsoft SharePoint or SharePoint Online. It's well, the functionality is as displayed over here. SharePoint site segments, I haven't tested that any as yet, but it should be that some functionality is disabled when you have multiple segments and you have those barriers. And talking about segments, the way this works is that you really have to configure your segments within Azure Active Directory. Those can be based, for example, on a department. So if you say I've got a department H, then okay, that's segment H, and I've got a department A, then that's department A. And then you set up policies to really separate those segments. It's still based on PowerShell, unfortunately, but yeah, I think it was during last Ignite, that they said that a GUI would be coming. So I'm still waiting for that. Okay, information barriers. Okay, looking at the time, I'm just going to end up with some things. There's some other things you might be looking at for compliance from a compliance perspective. One is insider risk management. You can set up policies to check, for example, insider risk, threats to your organization. One of them might be, for example, unwanted or undesirable communications. So that's communications compliance. You can set up a policy for that, and then the system will start looking at that. If there's any of information being shared from Teams, for example, and that really I won't be demoing that. It's part of the E5 compliance add-on within Microsoft 365. And here's just an example of things which I set within a conversation in Teams, and then it's being triggered in communications compliance. And like I said, auditing, I just wanted to at least mention auditing. Please take a look at it if you haven't already. Microsoft 365 auditing, there is so much information in there from a compliance perspective as well. Creating teams, deleting teams, channels, etc. And everything, at least within the E3 license for Microsoft 365, is stored for at least 90 days. So that's well, a lot of times really look at your auditing records. Okay, like I said, a lot of information, and I'm trying to wrap up right now. The architecture of Teams, I think it's still kind of complex. I wanted to show you how it all interacts. Private channels are still an issue because some of the information really isn't part of some of those compliance components of Microsoft 365, but they are coming. Well, one of the other things is don't forget about the security and governance baseline. There are some simple things you can do to really get Teams very, very secure, and there's simply following a checklist. And if you want to, I can provide you with that one. And if you really want more information on the governance for Teams, then I've included the URL as well. So yeah, with that. Basically, that was my session on compliance and Teams for at least information protection, information governance, e-discovery, etc. So, well, thank you for attending.
Thank you, Albert. That was
Thank
a
you so
great
much.
session.
Sure.
It was really great to follow up about the insights of compliance. That's kind of one of the areas I haven't been able to touch that often. So it was really super to see what's happening. There was one question in the chat: is there an architecture diagram available explaining the substrate microservices?
Yeah.
Easy one.
Easy one. Well, if you go to the link I just shared, just let me get the session up again. You'll find a lot of those diagrams, architectural diagrams. So there's a lot of there for Teams compliance. I'm not really sure if that substrate architecture is there, because to be very honest, I really had to delve deep into any Microsoft docs.microsoft.com to really find some information on it. It's really not that well documented, to be very honest. So I'll just go to this link, and probably it won't be there. But like I said, I will share those slides with you as well. So any diagrams you can have within this presentation, no problem.
Okay. Does someone want to open the mic? Okay, not yet. The recording is still on, so everybody stays quiet. Yeah, that's the usual. So I'll just take this time before I stop the recording about reminding about of our next meetup, the first one on the 2021. So the next year, when everything is going to be a lot better and different. So January 25th, we have Michael Pletner talking about user adoption needs for enterprise voice, and we have Matti Paukkonen talking about Teams templates. And for once, it was an easy name for me to pronounce with Matti. And what I have learned during this year is that there are a lot of names, and it's not always easy to say them out. So I don't feel that bad about not everybody knowing how to pronounce Finnish names. We are in a major league, of course, with difficult names. But hey, and of course, just a reminder that we have our social media links there. Please do connect, join, share, care, and then let people know about this. And of course, let them know that the big community conference is coming at the end of May as well. All right, let me just, Adam, do you want to add something while I find?
Well, the link Albert was mentioning, I pasted that in the chat. And also, I don't know if you mentioned it, Vesa, but this recording will be uploaded to our YouTube channel shortly as well.
Yes. All right. Excellent. So you're sexy and you don't know it.
Yeah, exactly.